Welcome to the Zebra Pen, Either Way We HNC It podcast.
Hello, and as the gloriously royalty-free music fades away, I can welcome you once again to another episode of the Zebra Pen. I am your host, Jed Brooks-Lewis. And firstly, as I always say, if this is your first time, thank you so much for joining us and wanting to learn a little bit more about officiating and what makes officials tick. If you're back for another episode, we love a repeat listener. Thank goodness you haven't been put off by it, and great that you just want to learn even more. We've got so much interesting flag football coming up over the summer, be it the World Games, be it the European Championships, be it the other continental championships around the world. So this is great, a great opportunity to learn about that third team on the field and what's going on behind the stripes almost. Speaking of that, it may as well just introduce our guest for today. I've known him about 4 or 5 years now, one of my close officiating friends from the beautiful city of Munich, Germany. It's the wonderful Niko Tzioras. Hello, Niko.
Hi, Jed. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
How are things going today?
Good, very good. I just came back basically yesterday from the German finals. It's still in my head. It's actually also still all over my computer. I have 3 reviews open at that time that we speak for the different games. I'm still getting clips all over Instagram, not only from the officiating side, but also from the teams posting clips from everywhere, basically. And it's just like everywhere for me now.
Yeah, and we will talk about that later. I don't want to get into it too much because it looked like an absolutely amazing event, but let's not jump too far ahead of ourselves. For our wonderful audience, do you want to give us a little introduction to you, your career, as it were, in flag and officiating, how you got to where you are right now?
Sure. I had to think about it beforehand, actually, because always when people ask me when did I start with flag, I say some random number that comes to my head, which sounds correct. But I researched a bit, and turns out I found out about flag football in my university sport program back in 2016. I just had returned from an Erasmus year and wanted to do something to, I don't know, get back into the university. And then there was this university sports program called flag football. I heard about it from a friend beforehand. The NFL was starting to get big in Germany. I watched it with friends, and then I just started playing there. And after starting for half a year at the university course, I transitioned basically to Munich Spatzen, my still home team now, and they were playing actually in the next year, 2017, and this is also when I started officiating, because back then and until today even, we officiate our own tournaments. So this was the first time I remember Googling the rule book back then, because it was not easy to find actually. And yeah, since then I started officiating. I got more and more into flag football, involved with everything. I started teaching other officials. I think started in 2020. And 2022, my friend and I thought about what can we do next. We had just like seen Big Bowl, but loved officiating there, but not as officials, but as players. And we reached out to class to ask about Champions Bowl and if we could somehow help there. And we were invited basically as unpaid interns. It turned out that 2 people had canceled, so we took their spot and actually had full games on our own. And I was even directly assigned the women's gold medal game, which is still bizarre to me today, but amazing at the same time.
Was this the first time that we met as well?
Yes, I think so.
My first Champions Bowl as well. I didn't quite realise you were so wet behind the ears and fresh into officiating at that point.
Into international officiating for sure. Like I had some experience in Germany,
Yeah.
but only international experience that I had were tournaments that I joined as a player and then had like my 2 games. At some point I noticed that actually like I looked more forward to the officiating than to the playing for those tournaments. But this is where I started to actually look for possibilities to just officiate in these big tournaments.
Okay. And you also have a bit of a admin role with the Spatzen as well, don't you? And can you talk a little bit about that side of things?
Yeah, sure. So since 2024, I actually took over kind of as the second board member of Munich Spatzen. The club was actually founded in 2018, and since then there was a board that came together every year and like they organized everything. Two of the board members actually um, yeah, voluntarily stopped at some point. And then they asked me, since I was already a lot involved in kind of organizing different teams, organizing events, and so on, if I just want to be also officially a board member. And yeah, since 2014, 24, I'm also helping there.
Okay, brilliant. I do have a funny story about Munich Spatzen, and I have told you this story before, and I will share it with the wider audience. And I think if for people to understand the joke, they need to be a German or speak some German. I will explain it for those non-German speakers in my audience. I do know that I have quite a lot. I know you have been as a team pretty omnipresent at Big Bowl, haven't you? In terms of you're always, that's one of the tournaments that I've pretty much always seen Munich Spatzen at. And I remember, I used to go to Big Bowl a lot, slightly less so now, last couple of years since my daughter was born, because international travel becomes harder and harder and you end up managing. But as I say, previously, I used to go to Big Bowl a lot and saw you guys on the fixtures list. And I was really confused because I thought Munich Spatzen, that's an odd name for a team. And it was only when you rebranded and you put the bird on your logo and everything that I looked at it and I thought, Munich Spatzen, not Spazieren, because I was confused deeply about why a team would call themselves like the Munich Walkers or something. Was it just like, everything's really, really slow? So yeah, for those of you not speaking German, Spatzen, sparrows, Spazieren, walking. So a very, very important distinction between those two, and one that, yeah, before you released your lovely new rebrand, I actually really, really like it. I think, you're wearing the t-shirt now. I think the jerseys are really, really nice. Having, seen them at the German finals. But prior to that, I was a little bit confused about where we were going. But that was an education piece for me more than anything, and proof that despite doing German for 7 years in school, I had still probably forgotten quite a lot of it. So you did talk a little bit about what you have been sort of teaching officiating. Can you collaborate about your goal with AFVD and what that involves at the moment, what that teaching looks like?
Yes. To be honest, I don't have an official role. I try to avoid those. I learned to avoid those because they actually come with a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I love giving my opinion, but I don't like responsibility that much. This way I can do the stuff that I like, which is teaching and helping other officials grow. But at the same time, I'm not like mandatorily involved in doing
Yeah.
stuff, even though I kind of still am, but not that bad. Let's say it that way. Yeah. So since I think 2020, I said before, I started helping teaching. In Germany, we do online courses for our officials. And in these online courses, I'm basically one of the two instructors that's always there. The courses are actually quite full. We always have around 50 to 100 people that we teach at the same time. I think that's a Zoom maximum. That's why we have to do then.
That's it. You're locked into however many you can fit in the room.
Yeah, it's a technical problem, basically that's what we do.
Yeah. And why do you enjoy that teaching role? I mean, it's something that I've done in the past as well. And like you, I've always got a lot from it. What tickles your brain from doing that teaching thing as opposed to just the on-field officiating?
I think it has many levels. Of course, it's nice to see people learning from it, that you can actually help them and they grow, and that's really, really nice. But on the other side, you grow yourself a lot while teaching others. That's something that I figured in these last 5 years. Basically, each year when I prepare those courses and I hold those courses, either by preparing and asking myself, wait, why is it that way? Why are we teaching it that way? Something is wrong in my understanding of the rulebook. And then I read it and I realize I had made a mistake in the last 2, 3, 4 years. And actually, I have to rule differently in the future because of something that I just read.
Yeah.
Or somebody asks a question and I'm like, wait, that's actually a good question. I don't know. I have to check that later and come back to you because I don't know the answer.
Yeah. I think it's similar, as I've spoken about on previous episodes, and you talked about at the start there, with video reviews and doing video reviews. I find those another one of those opportunities where I learn so much, because when we do video reviews, and similarly when we're delivering courses and teaching, we want everything that we say in those materials to be 100% true and 100% backed up by rule, don't we? We never want to be giving someone feedback or teaching people something that turns out to be incorrect down the line. And it's something that means that I'm constantly in and out of the rule book. Rule 2 in particular, definitions. It's the best rule in the flag football rule book because it will teach you everything that you need to know, and it takes all those words that have one meaning in normal language and then have a very specific different meaning in rulebook language, don't they? And having to do these reviews and do this teaching means that you're constantly in and out of the rule book, and it helps us grow, doesn't it? And it helps improve us, not our knowledge. There's still things to this day that I realized that, I didn't quite understand this. And suddenly I look in the rules and it clicks that actually this is what I mean. I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but I learned something about illegal touching as a rule today, for example, and how that works. And there's all these different bits where even when you're doing it on the field, you perhaps don't necessarily and both you and we know the rules very, very well, but I still wouldn't, I don't know it off by heart. I can't do verse and chapter for everything. I have a very good idea of how it's structured, but the best thing for that is going in there and reading the thing, isn't it? And actually looking stuff up. So I do think that teaching role and that review role really, really helps with that. So I think that's probably something that we both share there. So we talked about, that teaching, you talked about how courses are constantly full, maxing out Zoom, etc. And I think you have over 1,000 registered flag officials in Germany, don't you? Which is crazy numbers. I think here in the UK we would bite your arm off to get even close to that number, to get half of that number. It would be amazing. Why do you think Germany does so well with the number of officials that they've got registered, and also probably to the standard as well? There's a lot of high class officials on the international scene being produced from Germany. What do you think are the factors that are feeding into that to be such a factory for officiating success?
I mean, I have to put this number into perspective. I mean, it's 1,000 players who learn the basics of officiating. It's not 1,000 officials. Whereas, of course, they are officials.
Yeah, but that's the number that goes into all the requests for funding and everything, because you do have 1,000 registered officials. So
That's probably true. That's probably true. Whereas, to be honest, the funding itself is this course, and people pay, I think, 10 euros to participate. So it's more of a funding in that direction than in the other.
Yeah.
I think to answer the question why we have so many officials that are on a decent or very good level is basically the system that we established. We basically from the beginning had players officiating themselves or the other teams in the tournament. And here I have to mention Chris Kempfe, who built this whole system of the license system in Germany, who built the courses. And he has a very, very good teaching concept for online courses, which is very, let's say, anti-frontal class course, basically, but more of a interactive course. And I just expanded the license system together with the team to add an additional license level, and I asked him for feedback because I started creating this new license, and his feedback was constantly, and it's so annoying, but he's so right. This is too much monologue. Cut this down. This could be an exercise. This could be an exercise. Why is this not an exercise? And from, I don't know, a course takes 8 hours, and from the beginning where it was 4 hours talking, 4 hours exercise, we went, I think, down to at tops 2 hour talking and 6 hours of exercise for the people, which is actually really, really good. Like, this is the most positive feedback that we get is, wow, this course was actually really entertaining. I didn't even notice how the hours flew by, and
Yeah.
I learned so much here. And this is something that's basically all on him, so to say. And he alone is probably one of the main reasons why we have so many good officials in Germany. And this then comes together with the league mandating participating teams to have at least, I think it's 4 officials with a specific license. It differs from league to league for sure, but each team needs to have at least a specific amount of officials. In the beginning, it was in the system, so they needed to have at least so many officials, and those officials needed to do at least so many games in order to be able to continue. Otherwise, they were out of the system. It was not that they could just repeat the entry course. Chris wanted them specifically to like get up the ladder at some point. He always said we don't want a very broad band of low quality
Yeah.
officials. We actually to have
A funnel almost.
exactly. And this is, I think, this was very, very important for the officiating scene in Germany to actually have this mandate by the league to say, okay, today it's not only 4 officials, at least 1 official with a specific license needs to be on the field. Your team cannot provide that. That's a problem. You have to pay a fine or whatever. But this is basically the way why the courses are so big, because like, yes, flag football is getting really, really big in Germany compared to like 8-9 years ago. But nevertheless, it's still a lot of people that actually have to do this officiating course. And this is because the one side, it's mandated by the league, so the teams actually send a lot of people there in order to meet the number. But on the other side also, the courses are so good that actually for new players, the other players that already did that course say, hey, please take that course in order to learn the basics of our game and to understand the. So it's kind of a twofold system why so many people actually apply then.
Well, so I think the expression is, the carrot and the stick, isn't there? There's a nice little carrot there, a juicy carrot there to teach people. And as you say, people new to the game, not just learning how to officiate, but learning the fundamentals of the sport in terms of rules as well. And then you've got that big hard stick, which is the league saying you have to have a certain amount of people who fulfill this, or you're going to get fined, or you're going to get kicked out and whatever. And those two things have to work together, don't they, to get you to the point where you are. You talked about licenses. It would be interesting to actually know what that license system looks like. Where do you start? What's required to move up each of those tiers? What's the expectation at those different tiers? Because I think that's something that certainly as you try, I think a lot of countries are trying to do is build high performance programs. We already have them for players, obviously, but I think that needs to exist for officials as well, doesn't it? And I imagine as you get higher and higher up these licensing levels, that's something that's in consideration as well. So can you give us a brief overview of what that structure is?
So basically, we, since this year, have 4 like license tiers. Previously, we had 3, but we noticed that actually you reach the top too fast, and that sounds like kind of gatekeeping. But it's actually a problem when you want to select the best officials and people get too easy on the high level, then you actually have a big pool and then you need subjective criteria, whereas it's better to have objective criteria to select people.
Absolutely.
And this is why we introduced a 4th level, also because people complain that actually they started with the lowest tier but never learned the rules. They only learned mechanics.
Yeah.
And so the newest tier, the 4 tier that we call it, is basically an introductory course. First half, you just learn the rules of the sport, and the second half, you learn the basic mechanics of everybody but the referee. You don't learn about the clock. You don't learn about referee mechanics or enforcement. This is all for the later tiers. This is just how can we get this official out there and help officiate a game without actually needing to lead it.
Yeah.
This
And I
is
think
basically the 4th tier.
something I've spoken about previously is the difference between wanting to specifically develop officials and develop people who can facilitate a game safely and fairly, isn't it? And I guess what you look to achieve with that introductory tier is you're not expecting someone to have a perfect understanding of the rules. You're not expecting them to be standing in the right place, looking at the right thing every play. You want to get them in a position where they have a solid base knowledge of the rules. They have a rough idea of what they should be looking at, and they can deliver a game, if not with 100% of decisions being correct, getting the big ones right, keeping everyone safe, and making sure that it's a fair outcome at the end of it.
Exactly. And basically also understanding the game and understanding what each official's role is in the game. Because there are also a lot of players who don't really care too much about officiating. And even for them, we need to make the course somehow like relatable. They need to go out there and be like, okay, this was actually interesting. I learned something today, and maybe I will apply something of it for
I
games where I
mean,
will.
surely, lesson one, part one is don't complain to the referee about pass interference, because he or she will have no idea, because they won't be looking at it for those players specifically.
And then basically from up, there's the third tier, F3. There's always 1 year between the tiers. Like you can do it faster theoretically,
Yeah.
but this is what it is set up for. And you do 4 games before, like over the whole year, at least
Yeah.
4 games. And you go up to the next tier. And F3 is basically now you learn to actually officiate a full game and understand how to enforce a penalty and how the clock works, when does the time stop, when does the time start. I mean, you will learn that through your first year for sure.
Of course, yeah.
Now you get rules handed.
Now it's something that's being backed up by being tested on it, as opposed to just picking it up via osmosis, or whatever what you want to call it.
Exactly. To be honest, like 50-60% of the course is just, okay, where is your basic spot and how do you enforce illegal contact from there? This is like 60% of the course, because this is actually probably the most complicated enforcement in flexible. And this is F3. And then 1 year later, if you can stay on F3 if you want to. This is enough to participate in the league. This is, for most leagues, it's enough. At the higher leagues, maybe you need F2, at least 1 or 2 people, but normally for the normal players, that's totally enough, and many people stay there. But then there's the higher course, and I think you need some more games, and there it's about more complicated enforcements, more complicated rule, looking at unsportsmanlike conduct, for example, a bit more close, looking at 10-yard penalty enforcement at tries and stuff like that. Actually, so complicated that we two even, I think we chat about it at least 3 times per year, because we found some loophole somewhere.
Absolutely.
And this is basically the F2 course where we discuss these nitty details, but try to stay on top. And then the last one, and there you need to have officiated at least so and so many games in your career, and at least so and so many games during the last year. And then you get to the highest tier, and there you basically get different courses each year. So last year, I remember Pascal Philippia, one of our, like, the main person for the whole teaching committee, talked about signaling and hold a little, like 20-minute presentation about signaling. And next year, maybe somebody else will talk about, I don't know. I remember your clinic presentation about how to officiate a game and how to keep control of a game. And for example, talking to players and how we can do that in a fair manner. This could be something that I would expect in F1.
So it's when they get to that F1 tier that it goes perhaps beyond what's written in the rule book into those more the softer skills like you just talked about, but then there's also far more of those subjective areas that you can talk about, and philosophy. I think when you're starting out, philosophy is something that's almost, I guess, non-existent, because you just want to understand the fundamentals of the rule, and then once you get to a certain level, it becomes, all right, these are ones that we want to call. These are perhaps ones that, by rule may be a foul, but perhaps we don't want to call. So at what point do you start feeding in that subjective side of things and those softer skills? Is it at F2? Is it specifically with your top tier F1 officials that you're looking to introduce that to them?
I guess between F1
Yeah.
somewhere, we get to. I mean, people ask questions even from F4 where
Yeah.
your answer will be that depends on the situation.
Yeah.
And you can't, like, you will not be able to explain everything with the rules. But F2 is basically where we expect the people to have at least read the rule book once and
Yeah.
looked a little bit at the approved rulings, and then is where you can actually discuss more
Start getting into
details
the exciting, juicy stuff that fills our WhatsApp chat. Excellent. So you talked briefly about the league structure based on how, you know, many like officials you need to have qualified at certain levels. Can you talk a little bit about how in general flag football is structured in Germany? I know it's actually having a national league was quite a recent addition for you guys, wasn't it? I mean, that isn't
I
it's
mean,
so sorry, go on.
I mean, for me, it didn't feel that recent because I researched a little bit beforehand because I expected that question to come, and actually the first time there was a German-wide title being played out was 2016 when I started with the sport.
Yeah.
I mean there was play, tournaments before. There was
Yeah.
tournaments, university tournaments before. But Spatzen, for example, were founded as a group of friends in 2010 and played most of their games in Austria until 2016 when the German league started evolving. But in 2016, I looked that up, only 40 team only. That was actually a lot. 40 teams participated, but only 10 of them only played one tournament in that year.
Yeah.
It's actually less teams that actually played for the title. Today we or actually played for the title, and then over the years it slowly evolved. I think in 2018 we founded ourselves as an official club because the league mandated then from 2018 onwards to actually have not just be a group of friends with a name,
Yeah.
but have an official registered club in Germany that offers flag football as a sport. And a lot of teams then had to, a lot of friend groups then had to actually join another tackle team because the foundation was already there. This is something that we build on a lot. The tackle foundations that were there
Yeah.
since forever, basically. And because we use those structures, we also had to it forced us to professionalize really fast. So, as I said, in 2016, it was 40 teams that participated. Today, we have 2 German-wide leagues with a total of 36 teams and a women league, and underneath we have 10 regional leagues, which I think for Europe is quite a lot.
Yeah.
This is basically, and additionally to that, we have the whole youth leagues that exist forever because they are under the tackle structure because the tackle teams needed to have flag football in their
Yeah.
youth programs to be able to play tackle in the senior leagues.
I think that's interesting as well because when you talk about teams needing to be associated with a club, that's something that, so for example, in the UK, that as a concept, like multi-sport clubs, which I think are probably quite popular in Germany, like that's how most sport is organized, I imagine. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
That's not really a concept that exists here. So we have lots and lots of flag teams that just exist as flag teams on their own because it is a group of people in a place who want to play flag together. So we don't really have that formalized structure that perhaps you do. Do you think that change helps professionalize things and helps things be a bit more structured when it gets to organizing national leagues and etc.?
I mean, it's a two-sided medal. Because on the one side, yes, it helps a lot now that everything has been built up. But the first 1-2 years, a lot of teams struggled a lot with that rule and didn't understand why it was introduced. Because for them, it felt shitty to now have to actually. Before they were groups of friends, and the
Yeah.
only thing pay was the expenses for the trip. Now you have to pay basically admission for your club because the club then pays the AFVD for licensing fee basically. They pay a lot of different things for the players, and therefore they need to raise money as well.
Yeah.
So it's actually just getting more complicated.
Yeah.
That's what they look like for people that then had to create clubs or join clubs. But also it helps professionalize the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of professionalizing, something we mentioned earlier was German finals, which were truly amazing to see coverage of. Everything looked like a it was a fully professional broadcast. It was on ZDF, which for those of you who don't know is the equivalent German public TV. It's equivalent to the BBC here. I know I have a reasonably sized audience in Canada. Thank you, Scott. CBC in Canada, and you were on there. It looked huge. It was part of D finals, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong here again, it basically seemed to me to be German obscure sport Olympics is how I would describe it best. Like not your big sports, your soccers and whatnot, but those sports with, and I say this as a participant in flag football, slightly more niche, all of them coming together and having their finals tournaments in the same place. How did you find finals weekends as a whole, just that whole experience?
It was amazing. It's basically, it was a 4-day event, and it had, as you mentioned, all the obscure sports like I don't know, I just opened the website. It's 3 versus 3 basketball, 7 rugby, stand-up paddling, but also then the whole athletics. So
Sure.
this was basically what actually also drew a lot of people to the TV
Yeah.
and the stadium. So we didn't play in the big stadium, sadly, but still, this is why this got so much attention. It
Yeah.
had 20 different sports in there. It lasted for 4 days. It started on Thursday and ended on Sunday. And we were lucky to get the Saturday and Sunday slots. So it basically was a German championship looking a little bit like a mini Olympic Games in Germany inside a city.
Yeah.
Amazing. And that was also the feeling in the city. Like, we arrived there on Friday evening, and you saw immediately like a big crowd of people. Our hotel where we were was full of other sport teams or other athletes, and it was amazing. Like, you basically, when you walked through the city, you passed by a big church, and in front of the church there was the 3 versus 3 basketball court with stands and everything, and a lot of people cheering around it. And next to it, only 100 meters, there was a speed climbing build up, and people were speed climbing there. So, and then you came to our fields, and I remember like somebody told me that they were walking to the fields and there was firework, and then people from yesterday who played rugby were talking about it like, hey, there's fireworks, let's go there and look what is happening. And this was like the feeling that surrounded the whole event, and
Yeah.
being there was amazing already, but the effect that it has for us and on the sport also was amazing. Like, how it works basically for the German finals is that 8 mixed teams and 4 women teams qualify for the finals, and then they play basically all the non-medal games on Saturday, and the mixed bronze medal game and the women's and the gold medal game were both played on Sunday. And on Saturday we just got a field, 3 fields on a grass court, and people could stand around, but there was no like stands or something.
Yeah.
Sunday we were allowed to go into the arena. That was like it wasn't an arena that was already built there. It was only built for
A
these
temporary put together for the
temporary,
event. Yeah.
exactly. So they just had like stands, but the stands alone. I tried to count them before and look how much people there were fitting, and I guess it was around 1,000 seats. And this is already amazing for a sport like flag football, because like, if I'm not sure how it was in Finland. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it. But all the events that I have been to, including Ireland with the European Championship in 2023, I have never officiated or played in front of a crowd that big.
Yeah. So from what I saw on the feed, especially for the Sunday games, the crowd you had there was amazing. I think when we were in Finland last year, we had a couple of thousand people in the stands. It didn't look far different from that in terms of the volume that you had there. I think the big thing for me was just how much it looked like, and I don't mean, this sounds weird, I say a real sport in inverted commas, but you mean like when you watch soccer on TV or whatever. It made flag football, and it was the same with the with the World Championship final last year that they played in Lati Stadium. It looked like something you would see on ESPN or whatever, and it was exactly the same with the broadcast that you guys had on ZDF, where you were cutting to replays instantly, had pyrotechnics when people were scoring. It was amazing to see flag football, something that, I've been involved in since 2011, that was, starting out. And I can remember the 2017 European Championships, where we were basically just in a field and there weren't any stands, and it was just some fields marked and we were playing on those. And now we've got national finals being played in these big multi-sport events with 1,000 people watching it, and it's just amazing to see that level of growth for the sport in such a short amount of time. But can you talk a little bit about, that's the finals as a whole? Can you talk about your personal experiences of it? How do you think it went for you from an officiating perspective? What games did you end up working?
Yes, for sure. So basically on Saturday, we officiated in a crew of 4 the group games, and this was fun. We switched a little bit through. I had a lot of clear games, but I had also some close games. These are especially fun. I don't need to tell you. It was amazing. Also, like playing these, like, normally in these fun tournaments that we normally have, these international fun tournaments, you go through the group stage and you get, like, mostly in the first 2 days or first day, depending on how long the tournament is, you're lucky if you get a close game, because most games are a low-level team playing a high-level team because they haven't yet gone into the
And based on seeding and everything, you have these higher teams playing these lower teams, and it ends up 15-0 or whatever.
And this was different because in the finals, they were only the best team.
The cream of the crop.
Yes. And so we had 2 groups of 4, and both groups actually managed to have a 3-way tie between the top 3 teams, and the team was actually behind. But there was always this very, very close games that led to actually one team getting out of the semifinals, even though they had beaten as many teams as the other, just because of points differential, which shows that it was actually all on the same level, which is amazing for us.
Well, that's what we want most, isn't it? We want parity, and we want...
Yes.
I always say it's far, far more interesting to officiate a competitive game than it is something that's 30-0, that you are, midway through the second half and your brain just doesn't turn off. But it is much, much harder to stay focused, isn't it, in one of those games than it is in a competitive one. Being honest, those are also the games where the moment your brain starts to switch off slightly, something weird happens, or, a big foul happens, and you have to go and manage that situation. It will be those games where it isn't close and you almost want to get through this. You're thinking about the next game, about, I wonder if the next game will be competitive, midway through the second half of this game. And that's when something happens and suddenly everything comes crashing down and you're having to deal with something. But it's great that you had that level of parity between teams. It's more enjoyable for us, isn't it?
Exactly. So this was amazing. Then another experience I might talk about is that I, of course, didn't have any impact on the crews. I just worked the games that I was assigned to. And the first game I was assigned to was actually Munich Spatzen against Augsburg Lions, which felt kind of strange to me, and I pointed it out, but it was okay for them. And I mean, for me, this happens sometimes, since we have quite a lot of teams now in Germany. I think we have 4 senior teams now, plus the women team. So it might happen that I have to officiate our own team. But I think this is actually quite difficult. I mean, we also do it. I remember we in the European Championship 2023, for the last day games, we just had fixed crews, and whatever game you get, because you don't know which team will proceed, you will work that game independent of your nationality and the team's nationality. And I have to admit, at least for me, I think that's quite difficult, at least on a level. Like, I want to be open for the nationals, because you're not that, like, attached to the team, maybe, depending on multiple factors. But for me, as the basically second board member of the club, to officiate them is
something
actually
you've actually got quite an investment in that team,
Yes,
haven't
exactly.
you? Because, like, it's not the same, and they have they've changed the policy from an IFAB perspective now anyway, where you don't officiate your own country, which is fantastic. You know, I have quite a lot of close. I do have some close relationships with people part of the national team. I'm not super close to them, but I know them well enough that it feels a little bit awkward, because if something gets called or whatever, they will use my first name to talk to me, which sounds like such a small thing. But when you think about, oh, the other team, are they going to hear that and they can think, oh, what's going on here? And it's not so much I think I will have an issue with it. It's more about the perception, isn't it? Now, I think that's a little bit different from what you have to go through, where you're actively on the board for Munich, want them to do well. I can remember last year
I remember specifically for that game, I was nervous, but not because of my role in the game, but for the team and, of course, for them to perform. But on the other side, I managed to stay neutral in those games.
Yeah.
But what I don't want, actually, that's why I put myself on referee there, because in my opinion, as a referee, you have the least difficult decisions to make.
Yeah. The least ones that are going to have a tangible impact on the result of the game. You're not going to be calling a DPI in the final play that extends drive that they go and score on. You might have a couple of shielding calls and maybe one or two illegal contacts on the quarterback, which is normally a pretty easy call, isn't it? It's not something that's particularly controversial. So yeah, I guess that is probably a smart strategy to approach with it.
But as you said, I don't want to be the one that is standing close to a ball in the air and then two people collide and I have to make a decision, because whatever decision I take, it will look wrong.
Yeah.
Like, either I decide against my own team and then they will be like, why? It's a clear foul. Maybe that like we will make mistakes, that's for sure. But as you said, the optics of those mistakes are completely different if it's a game where where you're not invested at all, or if it's a game where you're actually invested in some kind and form. And there it's difficult then to actually, for people to understand the mistake that you just made.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, your tournament ended with working the women's gold medal game at Field Judge. How did you find that as an experience? Was it, you talked about the fans there and everything, was it a good experience? You were on national TV. I can imagine that's probably up there as one of your top officiating experiences now.
Yes, it was amazing, and I think it was my up until now top moment basically in officiating. And like, it's a completely different kind of state of mind that you're in during those games. I also reviewed the game afterwards, and my movement is much sharper than on a normal game. I noticed that, just because like you're also tense, but in a positive way. And of course the stands help a lot, the cameras help as well. Like, we got the ratings yesterday. 1.5 million people actually watched the first
I knew
half.
he had to fit that number in there somewhere. He was so happy to tell me that last night. I knew he had to squeeze it, which it's a crazy number.
Yeah, not for me. Like, I of course I like being shown on TV in front of 1.5 million.
I absolutely would be thinking a little bit about me.
Yeah. But you would be the referee, you know. You would have even more screen time. For me, like, people noticed me, but the sport was shown in front of 1.5
Yeah, of course.
million
No,
people.
that's the big
This
thing.
is so amazing. Like, this is something that I'm really, really happy to see. I'm happy for both teams, actually, for the girls on both teams, that they had 20 minutes of screen time and they showed really nice and good football. And the last 2 minutes were shown as well. It was such a nice game. Like, also for me as an official, like, the game was, both gold medal games were tied until the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Is probably the best we can showcase for the sport.
That's what you want, isn't it?
Exactly. That's why this game was so amazing for me to work. And I also had some really nice, difficult decisions to make here and there. Happy to not have made too much mistakes at this game. But I actually think this is also because of the pressure.
Yeah.
The positive pressure, like the stands behind you, the teams playing in front of such a big audience. You just can elevate your official game basically as well on a different level.
Yeah. How did you feel immediately before the game? Because I can remember I turn into, I might not show it, but I turn into a bit of a nervous wreck sometimes. How did you cope with that preparation? Did you feel chilled? Were you nervous? How was it feeling for you?
There was so much going on. that I actually didn't have that much time to think about it, because directly in front of the game, and I was really happy about that, there was the bronze medal game where Spatzen actually participated and managed to win the bronze medal. So this way, the first half, I just sit on the stands and watch the game, and also watch the officials and watch the initial ceremony, the coin toss stuff that I will have to do as well.
How everything was working, because I think that's
Exactly.
something that as we get games that are bigger and bigger and showcased like this, like the World Championships, all that stuff that perhaps we haven't thought about before with regards to television, with regards to procedures, all that admin-y stuff that when it's just shut up and ref doesn't exist, turn up and get on the field, you don't have to think about. Suddenly all that starts having to be layered in, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So after the first half, I went to where we said we will meet. I got a radio. I got to some instructions. We went over there. We met another crew. They told us how it will happen on TV. They told us that there will be somebody coming in singing the national anthem, the whole procedure. And until they finalized everything, and we even had to change one radio because it didn't work, it already started. So
So you didn't have that
I didn't have
downtime.
time to be nervous. Yeah, exactly.
To let it stew away in you, which is I remember, because when we did the World Championship final last year, we had the women's gold medal game was the last game of the entire event, and we got to the stadium about 4 hours before kickoff. We had games of the men's final before that. We had third place playoff games, and there was just so much time within that for it to stew and that nervous energy to build up. I guess, it's quite good that you didn't actually have that time to think about what you were almost going into. You had so much to tick off. This is quite a niche question now. You talked about using radios during the game. Did you find that beneficial, wearing a radio and being able to talk to other officials while wearing a radio?
And we actually had 5 people crews in the final, and we had a live commentator in the stadium. We had fireworks on every touchdown. We had music for each touchdown and also between plays. So having that radio really helped a lot, especially because of the 5 people mechanic that we normally don't do. So I, as a field judge, communicated so much with the side judge and with the back judge about which line we will cover, that for this alone it helps so much. Even though I still have to get used to that, and I think the quality was shit, and they didn't understand me for half of the game, and I didn't understand them for half of the game. But next to that, it was amazing.
It really,
we also tried.
But other than some minor kind of technical difficulties, it was something that improved the on-field officiating with that communication aspect.
Yes, for sure. We also tried out on the first day. We had 4-man crews, and one official is a former soccer referee, and he brought basically his open mic set, which costs, I think, 1,500 euros or something like that for the whole set, for 4 pieces, basically. We couldn't use that on Sunday because we were a 5-people crew. But with this open mic set, it's even, because there you understand each other perfectly. It brings a whole new level to mechanics, because I noticed the crew that used it in one game, it was really good. They worked it really well, but at the end, they were all standing still, and I was watching from afar, and they were all standing. The game was over, and I was confused. Everybody was confused, and after like 10-15 seconds, suddenly the game was over, and the referee blew the whistle and stopped the game. But they were communicating the whole time, didn't come together, because the mics were so good that they didn't need to. But this, of course, is an issue and something you need to basically practice with these settings. But I think overall, I myself, especially because in the youth, we always have tackle referees helping out, and they always ask, should I bring a radio? I always love to make a little bit fun of them and telling them, why would you need a radio? The field is at 25 yards. Like, we stand 25 yards from each other. I can tell you what to do. You don't need a radio. This kind of changes on the big stage, because it looks much better if I don't have to shout over the field. I don't annoy players off the field. I can just talk into my mic, and he will hear me and apply or not apply or answer.
And one of my pet hates is when you end up with all the officials huddled together for a long conversation, and anything that we can do to reduce those, especially given we want the sport to be more of a product, don't we? And something that's attractive to TV audiences. And much as we love talking about rules, I don't particularly think that 1 million people watching on ZA necessarily want to watch the officials huddle up. So anything that we can do to minimize those is probably net.
And there to basically go back to the production value, you never saw the officials huddling. Like, this was amazing. You said it yourself when you reviewed the game. You couldn't really review it that well because the production value was so high that immediately after the play, 3 replays were shown, and immediately after that, the next play started. So
yeah,
the sport was so dynamic, so fast. That was amazing.
Yeah. So I guess you have answered one of the questions I normally ask, which is, what's one of your favorite officiating experiences? And, having just described that women's gold medal game, I feel like that probably slots in there quite nicely, doesn't it? Are there any others that immediately any others that immediately spring to mind for you?
Maybe next to that, the women gold medal game at the European Championship that we officiated together.
Yeah.
It was also an amazing game. We had some very interesting decisions to make. I still show a clip where I think it's a very, very picky but good interference call that we then enforced completely wrong, which I like to show in my teaching courses because it's a perfect example where only in the third angle you see the actual push-off, but also then after showing that, and they will be like, oh, okay, yeah, that was a good call. I'm like, yes, I did a good call there. And then we enforce it completely wrong, and you see, you can always learn from the mistakes. So it's a perfect video for teaching purposes, and I love thinking back to that because it was an amazing tournament.
Yeah, and that game in general was such a great game, wasn't it? It went down to the final phase. We had so many lead changes. At one point, I thought we were in for overtime, and then we had the score, and then we had Spain throwing up Hail Marys at the end, and it was a crazy game. You always want finals to be like that, don't you? You want it to be that really high class game. I remember coming off at the end of that, and I was so emotionally drained from it because it was such an intense environment. I gave you the biggest hug I think ever. I remember standing on the field and just giving you this hug because I just wanted to get some physical contact with someone, just to because it was such a high pressure environment. And I think we delivered. What we delivered was really, really good. And we did have one screw up with enforcement, but in general, the actual decisions for what happened during the plays were really, really sound. And the 4 of us, me, you, Olivia, and Cyril, worked really, really well together. We had spent that whole day together, hadn't we, working, and it was so nice for us to get familiar with each other, and especially when you're a gold medal crew, you're some of the best, aren't you? And it's nice when you're spending a whole day working with people who you trust completely. To be honest, that whole final day for me is one of my favorite officiating experiences because I thought it's one of the best crews that I've ever been a part of delivering. I think all the games that we did that day, we did phenomenally well in, and it was just that whole experience. I was a bit of a nervous wreck immediately before the women's final. I remember running around back the fields at the University of Limerick trying to calm myself down. But yeah, that whole day was just an amazing experience.
I mean, the whole setting was also amazing. The university was so nice, and but coming back to you saying that you were actually so nervous in front of the game, that's something that I wanted to say before. I think that's the difference between officiating a game as referee and field judge, where you're taking a role where you at least don't communicate with mic on and with the stands and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was the working with the mic as well is always an interesting experience. Again, I spoke about this very subject to Mara last week, where I was talking about how you spend the whole game paranoid. Have I turned this on? Have I turned this off? Worrying about it. And it is always an interesting one. So I always ask the other side of the coin, a question, around this career about, is there, one game, one specific experience that stands out in your mind where perhaps things didn't go as planned and it's something that you really learned from and had to take something from moving forward? Is there one that just specifically stands out to you?
I have 2 situations, so to say. The first one being this first Champions Bowl, that I was a part of. And there was one of the first group games. I remember that it was Blackbirds. I don't remember against whom. And I remember back then we spoke a lot about unfair tactics in Germany and how if a score is really like denied just by a contact that was only done because like with intention to only nullify the score and no intention to go for the ball,
Yeah.
we could actually also give the score and open this box of Pandora, this unfair tactics rule that we have.
Yeah.
And this was still in my mind. And then I had this group game, and there was like this deep pass to the end zone where the one defender of the Blackbirds actually really only went for the opponent. He didn't go
Sure.
anywhere for the ball. That's what I saw from my referee position. So I went to the side judge to check, and he was like, yes, he only went for the player. He didn't went for the ball. So I decided, because a 10 yards penalty would actually put the team just in front of like after a first down, so
Yeah.
really bad spot, to
Yeah.
give a 50-yard penalty. And I remember that the team went nuts about it, and we had I think at least 10-minute discussion about it. Saw you sitting at the side. After 5 minutes, I walked to you, asked you, "That's possible? I can do that, right?" And you were like, "Yes, you can do that." So I went back and we talked another 5 minutes.
You can do it. I don't know.
I don't think you should, and I learned that there. This was a good learning experience for me, especially like not being worth it for sure.
Yeah.
Like having a 10-minute discussion for a 5-yard penalty. But also, if something is covered by the book, of course, we don't need to open this unfair tactics rule.
Sure.
Like, I'm really happy that I made this experience, and
Yeah.
I got a new friend from it. I think Stefan hated me that day, but since then we grew to get...
We've improved. The relations have improved. There is
exactly.
a fantastic picture of me and Stefan having to negotiate, I think, after the game. And I think it was specifically about this call that we were negotiating. But no, it's definitely one. And you're right that there's this, when you call it a Pandora's box, I think unfair tactics and something it's calling that it needs to be something so like niche and so clearly. The classic example you give is it's the final play, or like someone that illegally blitzes from 1 yard away specifically to burn clock or whatever, isn't it? And you want it to be really, really obvious, and it's always difficult. Yeah. So I guess that's always an interesting one to learn from, from where those experiences that what we can learn from. Sorry. Yeah.
It's good to make those mistakes, but it's also shit to make those mistakes, because
absolutely.
like it feels bad. Like after the game, you think about it. I mean, in this case, it wasn't that bad. Like it's nothing that decided the game, but this 10-minute discussion and the whole like aftermath, I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you need to make the mistakes to grow as a referee. I can also grow by having good games, but the mistakes are the ones that you remember.
Those are the ones that like you get. Yeah, like it's great when we can sit around and just pat each other on the back and say, "Oh, didn't we have a fantastic game?" And what we did just did now about the 2023 European final. But I think those ones where stuff does go not completely our way are really, really good for us as well. So I guess I want to end on two more fun questions. So my first one is, I'm a great listener to music before I officiate. So I talked about the World Championship finals when I was very, very nervous. I was pacing around. Do you have one pre-game song or one song that you would say, this is my pre-game track to? Now, it can be whatever you want. My German music knowledge is not great. I know Schnappi das kleine Krokodil, and I know that World Cup song, which is like 54, 74, 96. Those are my two German songs. So it could be something German that I won't know. It could be something a bit more famous. Have you got one that you would say is your pre-game song?
I'm so sorry to have to disappoint you, but I actually almost never listen to music before the games.
Really?
I don't know why. I don't know. I watch other games. I talk to people just to somehow like get distracted.
Yeah.
But I don't.
No, you're not a music listener before the games. So that's fair enough. I have a playlist. I even bought a like a portable speaker. Like whenever I rugby referee, because with tackle and flag football, there's a crew of us. It's a little bit, that dynamic's a little bit different. When I officiate rugby, I'm on my own, so I sit in a changing room with a speaker on and just kind of listen to that. But it's interesting. Different people kind of get motivated in different ways. So my second question then, and I ask this of everyone who comes on the show is I am putting you in charge of the rulebook, Niko. IFAF have done their recruitment process and they have decided it's King Niko. He makes all the decisions now, no committees, just down to you. What's the first rule change that you're making in the flag football rulebook?
Like, do I also get 2 if I tell a boring one in the beginning?
Yes, that's the way it worked with Clace, where he gave a pretty dull one to start with
Exactly.
and then gave me a much more interesting one. So start with your
So-
dull one, give me a more exciting one afterwards.
So actually, I think that's really dull, but as a field judge, I'm so annoyed by this that the 7 yards that a blitz has to be away is actually counted on the whole body instead of just parts of the body that touch the ground, because that is something that I can easily see, especially if we play with the full mark championship field. There I can see the hash, I can see his foot or his hand, and then in the last moment he leans a little bit forward. I will not blow this play down just because he leaned a little bit forward.
Absolutely.
But also it's theoretically illegal and I want to keep the game fair. So if somebody leans more forward, I have to put them a little bit more back. But to find like this perfect line there is so complicated, whereas just changing the rule saying your foot needs to be behind the line or your hand, if you put it down, needs
whatever's
to be behind
touching
the
the ground
Easy.
needs to be behind the line. And I think that's actually, to be fair, you said that was boring, but I actually quite like that as a change. And it's about it's always interesting when what actually gets officiated. And you just spoke about how if someone leans forward and that their hand just breaks the plane of 7 yards, you're never going to flag that. I'm exactly the same. When I do field, I am never going to flag. I will manage that all day. I'll say I'll just back up a little bit or I'll set them up a little bit. But when
the play next time, please, a little bit better.
But when something, how it's written in the rule book and how it gets officiated on the field are quite different, I think that's when you've perhaps got an issue in rules, isn't it? And it's something that needs to be addressed.
Exactly.
And
like
I've given you praise because I actually thought that was a really good one. But you get 2 because I did give you permission. So please go ahead with your second one as well.
The second one is one that I actually think needs to be changed for some time now. I think we have a problem that we only have unsportsmanlike conduct as a contactless foul. We only, I always compare it to the yellow card in soccer, where you need 2 to get off the field. It's the same for unsportsmanlike conduct, but we only give this out for non-contact fouls, whereas we might have an aiming that is really close to a disqualification, but not just there. And then we have to decide between 2 things. Either it's just an illegal contact, a bumping into a defender while being a runner, which are completely different penalty, like fouls, but the same penalty. Or disqualify the player, which might have such a huge impact on the game and might not warrant for that immediately. And so I would love to have aiming count towards these unsportsmanlike fouls. I mean, we would have to change aiming a little bit, but next to that, we should have a rule that contact can lead to an unsportsmanlike.
I mean, that's probably the best way of putting it, isn't it? That you can, there needs to be some concept, and I don't know necessarily how that looks like, but some concept of a booking almost isn't there, that if someone does something that isn't egregious enough that we kick them out, but is a bit that makes you go, we can put them on notice almost, and make sure that if they do it again, that's the great thing of having that process is if they do it again, it's a really easy disqualification, isn't it? Because it's saying you had your warning, you didn't get kicked out on that first one, and you've been stupid enough to go and do it again. You've made your own bed here, haven't you?
And you had an official warning, because we tend to then try to manage it by saying, hey, this was the last time. Following that up is actually pretty difficult, because the next time he will do it at the end of the second half, he forgot about, everybody forgot about the situation in the beginning of the first half. So, or maybe he will then taunt another player and you will give him an unsportsmanlike for it. You will not eject him for it, even though it should have been because of these 2 unsportsmanlike situations.
And the problem with those soft warnings as opposed to something that's more formal in rule is that it's hard for us to give ultimatums, isn't it? Because we can say something like, the next one could be a disqualification, but then what happens if the next one is a foul, but isn't actually quite as bad as the first one. And then
you cannot disqualify him for it
Yeah.
because it's not enough
yeah,
at all.
and the other team, who might have heard this, you talking to him, will be saying, but you said to him that the next one would be a foul, would be a disqualification, and it puts us in a really awkward situation, doesn't it?
Exactly.
But that brings us to the end of another whistle stop tour around the flag football world. This week, Germany. I just want to say a massive thank you to you, Niko, for coming on, for telling us a little bit about your journey, about officiating in Germany and everything that comes with that. I hope you have a nice little break now that the German season's over, some time to relax, spend it with the family. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was amazing. I had an amazing time here with you. Thank you.
And also a massive thank you to everyone for listening, and tune in for the next one. Bye-bye.